So as you heard in Govan's report, like in previous years, the ANC President again promising that the party will fight harder against corruption. Cyril Ramaphosa said in that January 8 address that the party will soon finalise guidelines to implement its resolutions that members implicated in corruption will appear before the Integrity Commission, voluntarily step down or be suspended. That's in the absence of an acceptable explanation. Well, let's discuss this then with another political analyst, Lukhona Mnguni, who's joining us on Skype from Centurion here in Gauteng. Lukhona, very good evening to you. So, very split opinion on how well the ANC has fared on addressing the corruption problem. I want to lift a line then from the January 8 statement last night where Cyril Ramaphosa said every member accused of or reported to be involved in corruption should account to the Integrity Commission or face disciplinary processes. That sounds easier said than done based on recent history, doesn't it?
Absolutely, Tembegile. Of course, it is a standard going line as well now post the Nasrec conference. They have been prioritizing the Integrity Commission as the relevant structure to help them deal with this problem of people who have been accused of corruption or otherwise. Of course, we now know, as we have seen in the Gauteng province, with former Health MEC Dr. Bandile Masuku, his matter being referred to a disciplinary committee. So you do have this need or desire by the ANC that is emerging to appear as acting against those who have been alleged to have been involved in corruption. However, Tembegile, that is remedying the situation post the action. So you are not dealing with what needs to change within the organization for there to be lesser possibilities of corrupt conduct. So what is happening in terms of political education? Is the redeployment strategy of the ANC being scrutinized? Is the manner in which the ANC fundraises and relies on people to pump money into the organization actually being relooked at? And of course, what policies is the ANC proposing in the state machinery? Because they are the governing party. So what are they telling their deployees to do in terms of regulatory frameworks, regulatory mechanisms, policies and legislations that can at least help us close the gaps for possible corrupt doing, so that we don't always rely on dealing with issues after they have actually.
So you're basically saying the ANC has chosen treatment over prevention. Why do you think they've chosen to go that route?
Well, I think in its own popular thinking, the ANC has been quite lethargic in terms of being proactive and exercise a great degree of foresight. And also, of course, that's one issue from a policy visioning perspective. However, from a pure politicking perspective, treatment is better than prevention because, one, you hope that if those who then continue in the system and they find ways to be corrupt, and some of that corrupt conduct actually benefits the organization in terms of donations, whether in kind or monies to the ANC, they will be much smarter in how they do it. They will beat the system better and they will be less detectable, and therefore they will not be indicted. So you always work on the basis that not everybody will be caught. Those who are caught must take the fall, but those who are not caught must carry on. So that's why you then would choose treatment over prevention in a scenario like this, because previously I have argued that there is an emerging relationship between corruption in the public sector and benefit to the ANC. And of course, we have now seen an emergence of corruption in the private sector, colluding with people who have influence in the public sector, and then again, that collusion seemingly benefiting the ANC. At least that's what we are starting to see from the recent evidence that has been emerging from the Zondo Commission in the last 3 months.
And it's important to stress then that as we sit here tonight, Lukhona, there's only a commitment that the ANC will soon finalise guidelines to deal with the members who would be implicated in these scenarios, right? How do they continue with that process, given that at the very highest level, opinion is so split, so fractured, especially because the ANC will itself go into an internal election process where people will be vying for various positions and hedging their bets on different people?
No, absolutely, Tembegile. And of course, we are just only talking about stepping aside from your current leadership responsibility. But I mean, I suppose the framework would also have to touch on what happens when you are still in the moment of stepping aside, and here comes a provincial conference, or here comes a national conference next year in 2022, and your matter in the courts of law has not been concluded. Are you eligible to stand for election? Because now we are being told about what must happen to people who are currently in positions. What happens to people who are alleged to have been corrupt but are not in a leadership position? Can they stand for a leadership position? So there's still a lot of work, I think, that the ANC has to do on this. It's not going to be easy for them. They must finalize the framework, but it's going to be highly contested. And I think this is why they keep inserting, which is, of course, from the resolutions of NASREC, this part that says a reasonable explanation or an acceptable explanation. I wonder how they are going to determine the criteria of what constitutes an acceptable explanation for you to avoid stepping aside, even though you may be alleged to be involved in corruption and there is a matter of yours enrolled before our courts.
Also, then, local government elections coming up this year, we're expecting, if there isn't a change due to COVID-19. What is the ANC's greatest threat in an election year?
The ANC's greatest threat, I think, this year is continued perception that the ANC is all about wanting to amass power in the state for the benefit of its leaders and its organization, but it demonstrates very little achievement in service delivery in a way that has had high impact to reduce social ills in society, to reduce questions of unemployment in society, to reduce questions of poor educational infrastructure and levels in society. So I think that is the perception where the ANC appears to be after power for selfish motives rather than for attending to the demands of the public and extending those public goods in a selfless manner that empowers society. I think that is the biggest threat, and we saw how that happened in 2020 when COVID-related procurement, particularly for personal protective equipment, there was a lot of corruption, there was a lot of mismanagement, there was a lot of redirecting of resources in a manner that was not expected. I think people have reached a point where they are tired of that. The only saving grace for the ANC might just be that the opposition appears a little disoriented, poorly organized, and some of the opposition parties are fighting in-house, and they are not as cohesive as they were probably in previous elections.
Political analyst and soon-to-be radio broadcaster as of Monday, Lukwana Mguni, thank you so much for being on ENCA tonight.